I remember the morning sunlight slicing through the courthouse windows like a spotlight. It painted the dusty foyer in golden hues, illuminating every suit, tie, and stiff collar gathered for the ceremony. I stood on the marble floor, heels clicking against tiles that carried the echoes of 1,000 promises. Promises broken and kept. I smoothed the front of my tailored navy dress, heart pounding as if eager to spill its secrets. Nathaniel had said he loved me, publicly, before our friends, before the judge. But love, I was learning, could vanish faster than smoke. My name is Celestine Marlowe, a name my mother chose because she believed I would always shine. I wish I could say today was my shining moment. Instead, it was the moment everything changed. I'd arrived early, anticipation coiling in my stomach. He was late. Nathaniel Blake, the man I thought I'd spend my life with, strolled in with perfect composure, briefcase in hand, hair meticulously combed. His secretary, a slender woman with 2 red lipstick, trailed behind. I watched them from across the room. Their laughter was too light, their glances too knowing. My chest tightened. When it was our turn, Nathaniel took my hand, but his thumb lingered. Not on my knuckles, but on the diamond glinting at my side. I forced a smile as we exchanged vows, my voice steady despite the tremor beneath. Do you, Celestine Marlowe, take Nathaniel Blake to be your lawfully wedded husband? I closed my eyes and breathed, tasting bitter irony. I do. Moments later, the judge pronounced us married. Applause echoed. Friends stepped forward. Cameras flashed. I'd envisioned champagne toasts, laughter, tears of joy, but I felt none of it. My eyes sought Nathaniel's, searching for warmth. Instead, he leaned close and whispered something that crushed me more thoroughly than any verdict. I'm sorry, but I can't do this. My pulse thundered. The room spun. Before I could respond, he turned on his heel and walked out. His secretary followed, clutching her purse like a trophy. My breath caught in my throat. Friends murmured. The judge looked scandalized. I was left standing alone, a bride abandoned in the courthouse foyer. For an eternity, I willed him back, but the doors closed behind him, and the sound echoed like a final thunderclap. I stood there, numb, as whispers rippled through the crowd. I heard she knew. What happened? Did he see someone else? My cheeks burned. I forced myself to bow, to thank the judge for his time, and to collect the bouquet someone handed me, white lilies that felt like daggers in my hands. I stepped outside into the midday heat, the breeze failing to calm the storm inside me. That afternoon, I left the courthouse with bruised dignity and a handkerchief pressed against my eyes. I was single again, humiliated by a man I trusted more than myself, and yet beneath the shards of my shattered dreams, something else began to stir, a hard knot of resolve. I would not let this define me. The following week, I walked into Hargrave Industries, head held high. The boss, Mr. Wallace Hargrave, an imposing figure whose reputation for integrity was whispered about in boardrooms, stood reviewing reports in his corner office. He looked up as I entered. His secretary, the same woman who had flitted around Nathaniel, ducked out, and I realized this was my chance. I approached. Mr. Hargrave? I said, voice steady. He gestured for me to come in. I sat across from him, drawing strength from every professional credential I brought. My law degree, my years at Blake & Curtis, my spotless record. When I explained my situation in calm, measured words, he listened without interrupting. You're applying for the legal counsel position, Ms. Marlowe? His tone was neutral, but I detected something else. Respect. I am. I've been through a personal upheaval, but my commitment to the law and to excellence hasn't wavered. He leaned back, folding his hands. The silence stretched. Then he smiled, a small, knowing smile that suggested he understood more than he let on. I've heard of your predicament, he said. You did well to come here. My heart stuttered. No pity, just acknowledgement. Welcome aboard, he continued. Our company could use someone of your caliber. In that moment, it felt as though a new chapter began. The door didn't just open for a job opportunity, it opened for something bigger. Redemption, reinvention, power. I walked out of his office with a contract in my hand, and a fire in my heart. I would show Nathaniel Blake, and everyone who ever doubted me, that I was more than a jilted bride. I was unstoppable, and I would make sure he saw it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. The next morning, the city felt different. The sky was clear, sun brilliant against the glass towers lining Main Street, yet I sensed a new gravity beneath my feet. I strode past the newsstand where the morning papers screamed about my scandalous wedding day meltdown. I didn't care. I had new purpose and a new job. Hargrave Industries loomed ahead, its logo gleaming like a promise. I pushed through the revolving doors, clutching my briefcase with steady fingers. As I signed in at reception, the secretary gave me a nod of recognition, a silent acknowledgement that I'd arrived. My new office was on the 22nd floor, with windows that framed the city like a living mosaic. I set my purse on the sleek walnut desk, unpacked my laptop, and surveyed the mountain of case files awaiting me. It was exhilarating. The chaos of legal battles, the precision of contracts. This was my oxygen now. Within minutes, I was summoned to my first meeting. Through a corridor of glass walls and polished marble, I entered the boardroom where Wallace Hargrave and several executives waited. Hargrave stood at the head of the table, his presence calm yet commanding. "Ms. Marlowe," he began, sliding a thick dossier toward me, "your first assignment is delicate. We're negotiating a merger with Ellison Tech, a competitor with deep pockets and an aggressive strategy." I nodded, my pulse quickening. This was the kind of high-stakes work I craved. As he outlined the terms, stock options, intellectual property rights, liabilities, I felt alive. Over the next days, I immersed myself in research, poring over financial statements, dissecting previous agreements, mapping out negotiation strategies. At night, I found myself unable to sleep, mind whirring with clauses, potential loopholes, and counteroffers. Word of my competence spread fast. Colleagues stopped me in the hallway to congratulate me. Assistants offered to fetch coffee without being asked. For the first time in months, I felt the thrill of respect. Yet every triumph carried a reminder of what drove me, Nathaniel's betrayal. I had to keep my vengeful fire under control. If I became reckless, I would lose everything. One afternoon, I discovered a discrepancy in Ellison Tech's filings, a buried clause that could tilt the merger in our favor, but it was risky to challenge it publicly. I drafted a memo outlining the potential leverage and presented it to Hargrave. He read in silence, then looked up, eyes sharp. "Brilliant," he said softly. "But dangerous. If they suspect we're aware, they'll cut us off." I bit my lip. "We have to strike when they least expect." He nodded. "I trust your judgment. Proceed." A surge of pride washed through me. It was the first time someone in a suit had called my risky idea brilliant. As negotiations kicked off, I found myself in conference rooms with stern-faced lawyers, power suits, and iced water. The days blurred, heated debates, coffee-fueled late nights, legal briefs taped to office walls like art. Then, late one evening, I returned to my office to find a single envelope on my desk. No sender, only my name scrawled in Nathaniel's handwriting. Hands trembling, I opened it. "Celestine, I made a mistake. I see that now. I came to apologize, but too late. I hear you're doing well. Good for you, Nathaniel." My chest tightened. The words were empty. No apology, no request for meeting, only a hollow admission. Rage flared. I crushed the note and tossed it into the wastebasket. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me rattled. I worked through the night, redrafting the strategy memo. By dawn, I had a new approach. Leverage the discrepancy quietly, then present our terms with confidence. It was subtle, elegant, and ruthlessly effective. At the merger meeting, Hargrave laid out our final offer. Ellison's lead counsel paused, surprised by the precision of our ask. If they accepted, we'd gain an invaluable edge. After tense negotiation, they agreed. We shook hands, pots of ink drying on the contract. I felt every drop of triumph, tasting sweet on my tongue. Hargrave caught my eye, raising an eyebrow in silent salute. But as I collected my papers, my phone buzzed. A news alert. Hargrave Industries versus Blake and Curtis. Legal battle over non-compete violations. Nathaniel's firm was suing my company, claiming breach of contract. My stomach lurched. He had struck back. I shut my laptop with deliberate calm. The boardroom suddenly felt smaller, walls closing in. I had won one battle, but the war wasn't over. I rose to leave, shoulders squared. The fight for my future and my vindication had only begun. The lawsuit shook the foundations of my world. Seeing Blake and Curtis's name at the top of that complaint, in bold letters, felt like a direct challenge to everything I'd built over the past weeks. I closed my eyes, pressing my fingertips to my temples to still the racing thoughts. That morning, I arrived at Hargrave Industries before dawn. The city streets were hushed, but inside the building, a storm brewed. In the boardroom, Wallace Hargrave paced like a tiger in a gilded cage. When I entered, he stopped, turning to me with a measured look of concern. "They've filed an injunction," he said quietly. "They claim non-compete violations and want to freeze our assets until trial." I swallowed. "On what grounds?" He slid a copy across the table. "They allege you accessed proprietary files during the merger talks. They're framing it as industrial espionage." I skimmed the documents, select excerpts from our confidential memorandum, a misquoted remark from my interview, and insinuations about my motives. Malicious creativity at its finest. "This is war," I said, "and they just fired the first shot." Hargrave nodded. "I need you to build our defense. The court hearing is in 2 days." My heart thumped, adrenaline surging. 2 days to dismantle their case. 2 days to prove my integrity and save the company that had given me a second chance. I retreated to my office, walls plastered with legal briefs and sticky notes. I poured a fresh pot of coffee, hands steady despite the storm inside me. Then I got to work, line-by-line analysis of their complaint, cross-checking emails, timestamps, metadata, anything that could prove their claims baseless. Hours later, after a lunch of cold turkey sandwich at my desk, I uncovered something crucial. The evidence they cited was from a duplicate folder labeled Draft Changelog, created by a junior associate weeks before I'd even joined the team. I drafted an affidavit request to the IT department, naming the associate and detailing the folder's history. That evening, I presented my findings to Hargrave and the in-house counsel. Faces pale with relief, they nodded, absorbing the implications. "This will blow their case apart," Hargrave said. 24 hours later, I stood before a judge in a packed courtroom. Opposing counsel, Nathaniel himself, sat smugly at the plaintiff's table. My palms felt cool against the wooden podium as I laid out our motion to dismiss, based on lack of standing and erroneous evidence. I watched Nathaniel's expression shift from confidence to anxiety as I systematically dismantled each allegation. I played the IT logs, highlighted the duplicate folder timestamps, and read the affidavit from the junior associate, whose honest apology undermined Blake and Curtis's integrity. When I finished, the judge leaned back, studying me for a long moment. "Motion to dismiss is granted," he said at last. A collective sigh echoed through the courtroom. Nathaniel's shoulders slumped as his clerk gathered the files. My chest swelled, not with revenge, but with vindication. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. Cameras flashed as I stepped onto the steps. I glanced at Nathaniel, who lingered by his car. For a moment, our eyes met. He looked defeated, regretful. I straightened my spine and spoke to the press with composed confidence. Hargrave Industries acted within its rights. Justice prevailed. When the crowd dispersed, I found Nathaniel standing alone. He approached, reluctant. "Celestine," he began, voice hushed. "I never intended." I cut him off softly. "Save it." Then I turned and walked away. That night, back in my apartment, I allowed myself a single glass of red wine. I raised the glass to the silent city outside my window. The fight wasn't personal anymore, it was mine, and I had won. But as I lay in bed, eyes staring at the ceiling, I sensed the next challenge stirring on the horizon. Nathaniel might be beaten today, But tomorrow he could strike again in ways I never saw coming. I would need to remain vigilant, stronger than ever. I closed my eyes and whispered into the quiet. This is far from over. Dawn broke with a muted glare, the city's pulse humming outside my window. I rose early, the taste of victory from the previous night still sweet, but a new day demanded new battles. Emails pinged with updates on the merger's final steps. Once complete, Hargrave Industries would gain market share the likes of which it hadn't seen in years. But I sensed something uneasy in the undercurrent of each message. I arrived at the office to find the legal team gathered in the conference room. Hargrave stood beside me as I detailed the timeline for final regulatory approvals and integration planning. It was smooth sailing, or so it seemed. Midway through my presentation, the door opened. A man in a charcoal suit stepped across the threshold, face pinched with urgency. "Miss Marlowe? Mr. Hargrave?" It was Agent Riley from the Federal Trade Commission. Official seal stamped on his folder. Hargrave's expression tightened. "What can we help you with, Agent?" He cleared his throat, flipping open the folder. "We have concerns about antitrust implications of this merger. There have been complaints filed by competitors and consumer advocacy groups. We'll need to conduct an investigation before approving the deal." My chest clenched. Another hurdle. More scrutiny. I exchanged a glance with Hargrave. His stoic nod urged me forward. "We welcome the investigation," I said, voice steady. "We've complied with all regulations and are confident in our position." Agent Riley nodded, eyes cool. "We'll need full access to internal communications, financial models, and board meeting minutes. Expect a formal subpoena." With that, he left as quietly as he'd arrived. Silence settled in the room like a storm cloud. I exhaled, meeting Hargrave's gaze. "We need to prepare for a deeper probe." He nodded, calling the IT and finance teams into action. The next days descended into bureaucratic maelstrom, mountains of documents digitized, affidavits drafted, interview transcripts prepared. Each morning I briefed Hargrave on our progress. Each night I pored over multi-year financial projections. My desk became a fortress of folders and coffee cups. Mid-week, as I cross-checked a set of board minutes, I noticed a cryptic note scrawled in the margins. "Project Phoenix, the 12th of April 25. Private meeting. Confidential." My pulse quickened. I dug through earlier minutes, trying to connect the dots. Phoenix? That code word hadn't appeared in any merger discussions. I asked our compliance officer about it. She hesitated, then admitted it was from a back-channel negotiation with a small partner company, rumored to hold key patents that could revolutionize our tech division. But Hargrave had kept it secret from the board pending due diligence. This was fertile ground for FTC scrutiny. Hidden side deals raised red flags. I realized we had to disclose it proactively, with full context, or risk the FTC deeming our behavior misleading. I drafted a detailed disclosure memo, walking the line between transparency and protecting proprietary negotiations. When I presented the memo to Hargrave, his face was grave. "Bringing this to light could delay the merger indefinitely," he said. I met his gaze. "But if they find out on their own, it'll be far worse. We'll be seen as hiding information." After a long silence, he nodded. "Proceed." 2 days later, Agent Riley returned, subpoenas in hand. I personally handed over our disclosure packet, watching him skim the summary before nodding curtly. The investigation intensified. Interviews with board members, third-party audits, even background checks on key executives. I held nothing back, guiding our team with calm authority. I felt the weight of every file I signed off on, but also a fierce pride in my leadership. On Friday, we received word. The FTC would not block the merger, but imposed stringent conditions: divestiture of certain overlapping assets, and a 3-year monitoring period. It wasn't a clean win, but it was victory tempered by reality. Hargrave Industries would emerge stronger, but with constraints. I exhaled, letting relief wash over me. As I packed up my things for the weekend, Hargrave caught me by the elevator. "Celestine," he said. "Yes?" I replied, He handed me a small box. Inside, a delicate brooch in the shape of a phoenix rising from flames. "For Project Phoenix," he said with a rare smile. "You rescued us from the ashes." My throat tightened. I pinned it to my lapel, feeling its weight and symbolism. In that moment, I realized I'd become more than an attorney. I'd become a guardian of this company's legacy. But as I left the building, the city lights flickered, and I sensed the night's stillness foreshadowed new challenges. My victory was real, but the war for power, influence, and respect, was an unending battlefield. I stepped into the night, pinning Harvey Industries' fate on my shoulders, ready for whatever came next. The weekend passed like a half-remembered dream. I spent Saturday morning curled on my sofa, nursing a cup of strong tea and replaying the week's victories and setbacks in my mind. By Sunday afternoon, I found myself drafting outlines for the next phase of integration: teams to merge, leadership structures to define, communication channels to streamline. Even on days off, the drive to shape Hargrave Industries' future surged through me. On Monday, I returned to the office feeling unusually restless. As I rode the elevator to the 22nd floor, I noticed the security guard giving me a respectful nod. Word of Project Phoenix, and of my role, had woven through the halls. The glass of my office door bore the sign: Celestine Marlowe, Senior Legal Counsel. I paused, fingertips grazing the letters. Senior Legal Counsel. It had a ring to it. I opened the door and stepped in, ready to tackle the day. My inbox was already brimming. Among routine memos and calendar invites, one email stood out, from the head of Human Resources, requesting an urgent meeting. Puzzled, I clicked it open. The subject line read, "Confidential. Personnel issue." Frowning, I grabbed my briefcase and headed down the hall. In the HR office, Ms. Danvers, the director, looked frazzled. She gestured for me to sit. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Marlowe. We have a delicate matter involving Mr. Thompson, one of our top engineers." She slid a personnel file across the desk. I glanced at the profile. Simon Thompson, lead engineer on Project Phoenix's prototype team. His record was pristine, accolades piling up. "He's been accused of leaking confidential designs to an external consultant," Danvers said, lowering her voice. "We have preliminary evidence, emails with attachments, meeting notes sent to his personal account, but Simon denies it." My pulse quickened. If true, it could jeopardize not only Project Phoenix, but also the FTC's conditional approval. "Have you verified the emails?" I asked. She shook her head. "The IT department is still investigating. We wanted your input before taking action." I tapped my pen thoughtfully. "I need complete access to his accounts, logs, everything. And I'd like to speak with him directly." She nodded. By midday, I had secured the digital records and scheduled a private meeting with Simon. His office overlooked the cityscape, the skyline, a tapestry of steel and glass. He greeted me with a tired smile. "Ms. Marlowe, to what do I owe this honor?" I returned a neutral look and placed his file on the desk. "We need to discuss these emails. Apparently you've been sharing prototype schematics with an external consultant named Dr. Vivian Reed." Simon's smile faltered. "Vivian's a former colleague. She asked for feedback on some generalized concepts. I never sent anything proprietary." I leaned forward. The attachments were full CAD files, and the meeting notes reference our patented process. "Explain." His jaw clenched. Look, I did send some files, not realizing they contained the full specs. I thought they were earlier drafts, not final. I'll retract them." "That's not acceptable," I said firmly. He ran a hand through his hair. "I can fix this. I'll get everything back, delete it from her servers." I studied him. Genuine panic flickered in his eyes. And something else. "Guilt? I'll oversee the process, and you'll indemnify the company against any loss from this leak." He nodded, relief flooding his features. "Thank you. I won't let you down." As I left his office, my mind churned. The threat was serious, but manageable. I would coordinate with IT to secure the files and draft an agreement with Dr. Reed's firm to ensure non-disclosure. Everything would be contained, if we moved swiftly. That afternoon, I drafted the containment plan. Legal demands for file deletion, affidavits from Thompson, risk assessments on IP exposure, and communication with the FTC liaison to report a potential breach. It was a delicate dance. Admit too much, and they'd penalize us. Admit too little, and they'd accuse us of hiding an incident. By evening, I had preparations ready. As I packed up, my phone buzzed with a message. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now back to the story. I smiled at the interruption, a perfect mid-story prompt, and replied to a colleague that I'd finalized the consent orders by morning. Downstairs, the building's lights twinkled like stars. I stepped into the night, aware of the fragility of success. One misstep, one loose email, and everything could unravel. But I would not let it. I had come too far, fought too hard. Tomorrow, I thought, would bring another challenge, and I would be ready. The sun peeked through my curtains on Tuesday morning, casting a warm glow on the stack of files next to my bed. The email from Dr. Reed's legal counsel awaited a response. I opened it over coffee. They agreed to a rapid deletion protocol on their server, pending a signed non-disclosure agreement, and a fine for breach of contract. It was an olive branch, but with sharp edges. I drafted the NDA and the settlement terms, then sent them to Thompson for his approval. As I waited, I headed into the office, mentally preparing for the FTC check-in meeting scheduled for noon. In the conference room, Agent Riley sat across from me and Hargrave. I handed him a binder containing our breach report, including the containment steps and signed affidavits from Thompson. He leafed through the pages, expression inscrutable. When he looked up, his words were measured. Hargrave Industries has followed protocol and disclosed in a timely manner. We'll note this in our final report, but no further action is required, provided no additional breaches occur in the monitoring period. Relief flooded me. A small victory, but crucial. Hargrave placed a hand on my shoulder as Riley left with a curt nod. That afternoon, I finalized the agreement with Dr. Reed's firm. The fine was generous, the NDA airtight. I returned to my office and filed a notice of resolution with HR, closing the Thompson file. Just as I leaned back, satisfied, my phone buzzed with a message. Meeting in 10 minutes. Victor Hawthorne. The name jolted me. Victor was the chairman of Hargrave's board, a man known for his conservative strategies and ruthless decisions. I straightened my blouse and headed to the executive suite. Hawthorne's office overlooked the river, his desk gleaming under a sky painted with late afternoon light. "Ms. Marlowe," he greeted, voice velvet but firm. "I've been reviewing Project Phoenix. Impressive work. Your leadership has steered the company through turbulent waters." I inclined my head, wary of praise from a man with such a reputation. He continued, "However, some board members are concerned about the long-term impact of our FTC conditions. Divestitures and monitoring for 3 years could expose us to vulnerabilities. I want your assessment on alternative strategies, perhaps spinning off certain divisions or seeking strategic partnerships." My mind raced. He was pushing me to proactively rethink the company's structure, beyond legal counsel into strategic advisor. "I'll prepare a detailed analysis," I said, meeting his gaze. He nodded, satisfied. As I left, I realized my role was expanding. I was no longer just a lawyer. I was an architect of Hargrave's future. The next morning, I began drafting scenarios. Spin-offs, partnerships, partial sales. Each option required thorough legal vetting and risk assessment. I collaborated with finance, operations, and strategy teams, synthesizing their input into a comprehensive report. By Friday, I presented my proposal to Hawthorne and the board, a strategic partnership with Novatech, a startup with complementary AI capabilities. In exchange for a minority stake, Novatech would gain resources and mentorship, while Hargrave would reduce asset overlap and mitigate FTC concerns. The board debated, but my clear analysis and legal safeguards won them over. As we adjourned, Hawthorne approached me, extending his hand. "Well done, Ms. Marlowe. You've proven indispensable." His words settled over me like a cloak. I realized how far I'd come. from abandoned bride to corporate strategist. But triumph was fleeting. On my drive home, a breaking news alert flashed on my phone. Blake & Curtis announces acquisition of Midland's firm, expanding non-compete lawsuits nationwide. Nathaniel was striking again, this time fueling a broader campaign to stifle ex-employees. I clenched the steering wheel. The game had shifted. He was now weaponizing the legal system to hunt anyone who crossed him. My phone buzzed again. A text from Hargrave. "Keep me posted. Dinner at my house tomorrow?" I exhaled, shoulders tense. Allies in this war mattered. Tomorrow night I would dine with Hargrave. Tonight I sharpened my defenses. The battlefield was widening, and I intended to win. The evening sky was painted in dusky purples when I stepped out of the car in front of Hargrave's townhouse. Lanterns glowed warmly along the walkway, casting dancing shadows on the stone facade. My heart thudded, not from nerves, but anticipation. I'd navigated boardrooms and courtrooms. Now I'd navigate the personal realm of my greatest ally. The door opened before I could knock. Hargrave stood there in a charcoal suit, tie loosened just so. His easy smile held both warmth and respect. "Celestine," he greeted, stepping aside. "Welcome." Inside, the living room was rich with leather furniture and tastefully arranged art. A roaring fire crackled in the hearth as soft music played in the background. Waitstaff circulated with champagne flutes. I followed him to a seating area. As I settled into a plush chair, he poured mine. "Tonight," he said, handing me the glass, "let's talk less about work and more about the mind behind the work." I took a sip, the bubbles tickling my throat. The ambiance was disarming. He gestured for me to share. "You've faced betrayal, lawsuits, federal investigations. You've emerged stronger each time. Where does your resilience come from?" I considered. Few people outside trusted circles had probed so deeply. "It's rooted in my past," I began, swirling the champagne. "My father was a judge, stern but fair. When I was young, he taught me that justice meant more than rules. It meant standing up for what's right, even when it's hard." Hargrave nodded, listening intently. "As for betrayal, I learned that pain can either break you or forge you. I chose the latter." I paused, then asked, "And you? What drives you, Mr. Hargrave?" He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "Legacy," he said quietly. "I was born into this company. I wanted to transform it from a family business into an institution, one that could change the world. But vision alone isn't enough. You need people like you to make it real." I felt the weight of his words and the unspoken bond forming between us. Dinner followed. Roasted duck with cherry glaze, asparagus spears, and a delicate lemon tart for dessert. Conversation wove between personal anecdotes and gentle strategy talk. He spoke of his late wife, and I shared memories of my mother's unwavering belief in me. Later, as we sat by the fire, Hargrave touched the phoenix brooch at his lapel and smiled. "You came into my company like a storm and left it renewed," he said. "I want you by my side as we navigate whatever Nathaniel throws at us next." My pulse quickened. His offer was more than professional. It was partnership. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He checked it, face darkening. "Another lawsuit," he said, voice low. "They're targeting our European subsidiary this time." My chest tightened. The front lines of our war had expanded globally. I stood, steady. "Then tomorrow, we'll defend them, and we'll win." He rose and extended his hand. "To victory, Celestine." I took the handshake, sealing our pact. Outside, the night wind whispered through the courtyard. The world felt both vast and small, as if every challenge we faced would shape our shared destiny. Tomorrow, I thought, we would face new battles. But tonight, I had a moment of clarity. I was no longer alone in this fight. And that knowledge was more powerful than any contract. The dawnlight found me at my desk, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows that stretched across the Hargrave Industries wing. Below, the city stirred to life, commuters flooding the trains, taxis weaving through traffic, distant sirens marking another day's pulse. I inhaled deeply, feeling the mix of anticipation and resolve swirl within me. The European subsidiary's emergency conference call was in an hour. I straightened my notes, poised to lead the defense. In the boardroom, Hargrave and I joined our international counsel, flanked by screens streaming live data from London, Frankfurt, and Milan. The counsel outlined the allegations. Blake and Curtis claimed our subsidiary, Hargrave EU, had violated EU competition law through exclusive bundling agreements, practices they alleged stifled smaller tech firms. I listened, mind racing, then outlined our counter-strategy. Demonstrate that the bundling increased consumer choice, offered significant cost savings, and that smaller firms remained competitive through alternative channels. I emphasized the importance of cultural context, EU's consumer protection ethos, and proposed a voluntary compliance amendment that would address regulator concerns while preserving our market position. As I spoke, I sensed nods of agreement. Hargrave's eyes met mine, gratitude shining in their depths. When the session ended, the EU Council pledged to file our submission within 48 hours, citing our thorough legal reasoning. Relief and exhaustion washed over me. This was more than document drafting. It was a delicate dance across jurisdictions and regulations. Yet each challenge strengthened my resolve. By midday, I returned to my office to find a bouquet of white lilies on my desk, survivor's flowers from a colleague celebrating our latest win. I paused, imagining how far I'd come since that courthouse foyer. I tucked the stems into a vase and sat, eyes drifting to the phoenix brooch on my lapel, from ashes to triumph. But the calm was fleeting. My assistant knocked and entered with an urgent file, a letter from Nathaniel's counsel, preemptively issuing a cease and desist to Hargrave Industries for alleged trademark infringement on a new AI sub-brand, one we'd quietly trademarked last quarter. I exhaled slowly, flipping through the letter. The AI sub-brand, codenamed Aureus, had been overshadowed by Project Phoenix but was now pivoting to market launch. Nathaniel's legal strike aimed to freeze our launch, further choking our momentum. There was no choice. We had to challenge it. I drafted a response asserting our prior use rights, accompanied by evidence of brand development, marketing materials, and board approvals predating any public activity by Blake and Curtis. I also prepared a motion for declaratory judgment to solidify our trademark claims before their injunction could take effect. By evening, the motion and supporting documents were finalized. I met Hargrave in his office to review them. His expression was a mix of pride and fatigue. "Celestine," he said, voice solemn, "I never imagined you leading our defenses on so many fronts." I smiled wearily. "I never imagined I'd be here. But let's win this." He extended his hand, and I shook it firmly. "To Aureus, may it soar." Late that night, I found myself alone in the office, the city lights glittering like distant galaxies. I savored a quiet moment of solitude before turning back to my laptop. Because tomorrow, I'd draft the reply from Nathaniel's team, summon our IP experts, and ensure Aureus would not just soar but dominate. And so the endless game continued, a battlefield of legal minds, strategies, and wills. But I had a secret weapon, the lessons of betrayal, resilience, and unwavering purpose that had carried me from the courthouse steps to the pinnacle of corporate power. Tomorrow, I thought, I would remind Nathaniel that some flames burn too brightly to be snuffed out. The following morning, caffeine and determination fueled me as I strode into Hargrave Industries. The European legal team awaited in the global conference suite, its walls lined with screens displaying live feeds from every subsidiary. I greeted each member, their nods acknowledging the solidarity formed through our recent battles. "Let's begin," I said, tapping my tablet. On the central screen, the headline blared. Hargrave EU faces competition lawsuit from former partner. But beneath the headline, I saw the raw data, market share numbers, consumer surveys, and regulatory filings that painted a different story. I led the session with crisp efficiency. I outlined our defense, built on consumer choice metrics and comparative analyses, and introduced a supplemental consumer impact report, fresh surveys indicating positive feedback on bundled offerings. The team hashed out the final touches, refining arguments for our brief. By late afternoon, I had drafted the memorandum to the German Competition Authority, harmonizing technical legal language with compelling narrative. I hit send and exhaled, feeling the weight lift, only to realize Nathaniel's next gambit lay just beyond the horizon. Back at my desk, an email from Blake and Curtis landed. Proceeding with class action support, clients seeking damages. They were recruiting disgruntled clients of Hargrave EU to amplify the suit. It was a classic ploy to overwhelm us. I didn't flinch. This was escalation. I drafted a two-pronged response. A public statement from Hargrave EU's CEO refuting the damages claims, backed by testimonials from satisfied clients, and a confidential countermotion to decertify the class, demonstrating the lack of commonality required for class certification. The next morning, I presented our strategy to Hargrave and EU executives over video call. Their approval felt more like a call to arms. Then, an unexpected message popped up on my phone, a LinkedIn request from Nathaniel Blake. Curiosity and anger collided. I clicked it. His profile flickered up, and beside his name I typed a message. "What do you want?" His reply came within minutes. "To talk. 5 p.m. today, Blake and Curtis office. No lawyers. A direct invitation to parley. Dangerous, but potentially revealing." I showed the message to Hargrave, who frowned. "He might try to manipulate or trap you," he warned. I met his gaze. "Or he might slip up and reveal his next moves." "I plan to go." He nodded. "Be careful. I'll notify security." That afternoon, I donned a simple black coat and set off for the Blake and Curtis Tower. The lobby's marble floors gleamed, and security cameras trailed my every step. Leading to their conference suite, I followed a barred hallway, heart steady but senses sharp. Nathaniel entered as I sat down, tall, composed, but his eyes flickered with guilt. "Celestine," he began, voice smooth. "Thank you for coming." I studied him, voice cool. "You wanted to talk." He leaned forward, clasping his hands. "This feud between us has become costly, for both sides. Let's consider a truce. Merge our opposing interests for mutual gain." His words dripped with plausible deniability. A peace offering, or a snare. I let a beat pass. "Why now?" I asked. He smiled sadly. "Because you're too dangerous to keep fighting. If we exhaust each other, someone else will win. And neither of us wants that." I clenched my jaw. "So you offer a truce to protect your empire?" He shook his head. "To protect both." I leaned back, eyes narrowing. Trusting him could mean ceding leverage. Refusing meant perpetual warfare. "I'll consider it," I said, rising. "But not here." He nodded, warily hopeful. I exited without another word, each step echoing against polished stone. Outside, security escorted me to my car. I exhaled, mind racing through implications. Back at home, I opened a fresh page in my notebook. 1. Analyze the offer. Risks. Benefits. 2. Seek counsel with Hargrave. 3. Prepare for tomorrow's board meeting. Agenda item. Proposed strategic truce. Natalie paused, pen hovering. A truce could mean unprecedented collaboration, or the end of Hargrave's independence. But whichever path I chose, I would lead. Tomorrow, the story would turn, and I would shape its ending. The dawnlight found me at my desk, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows that stretched across the Hargrave Industries wing. Below, the city stirred to life, commuters flooding the trains, taxis weaving through traffic, distant sirens marking another day's pulse. I inhaled deeply, feeling the mix of anticipation and resolve swirl within me. The European subsidiary's emergency conference call was in an hour. I straightened my notes, poised to lead the defense. In the boardroom, Hargrave and I joined our international counsel, flanked by screens streaming live data from London, Frankfurt, and Milan. The counsel outlined the allegations. Blake and Curtis claimed our subsidiary, Hargrave EU, had violated EU competition law through exclusive bundling agreements, practices they alleged stifled smaller tech firms. I listened, mind racing, then outlined our counter-strategy. Demonstrate that the bundling increased consumer choice, offered significant cost savings, and that smaller firms remained competitive through alternative channels. I emphasized the importance of cultural context, EU's consumer protection ethos, and proposed a voluntary compliance amendment that would address regulator concerns while preserving our market position. As I spoke, I sensed nods of agreement. Hargrave's eyes met mine, gratitude shining in their depths. When the session ended, the EU Council pledged to file our submission within 48 hours, citing our thorough legal reasoning. Relief and exhaustion washed over me. This was more than document drafting. It was a delicate dance across jurisdictions and regulations. Yet each challenge strengthened my resolve. By midday, I returned to my office to find a bouquet of white lilies on my desk, survivor's flowers from a colleague celebrating our latest win. I paused, imagining how far I'd come since that courthouse foyer. I tucked the stems into a vase and sat, eyes drifting to the phoenix brooch on my lapel, from ashes to triumph. But the calm was fleeting. My assistant knocked and entered with an urgent file, a letter from Nathaniel's counsel, preemptively issuing a cease and desist to Hargrave Industries for alleged trademark infringement on a new AI sub-brand, one we'd quietly trademarked last quarter. I exhaled slowly, flipping through the letter. The AI sub-brand, codenamed Aureus, had been overshadowed by Project Phoenix but was now pivoting to market launch. Nathaniel's legal strike aimed to freeze our launch, further choking our momentum. There was no choice. We had to challenge it. I drafted a response asserting our prior use rights, accompanied by evidence of brand development, marketing materials, and board approvals predating any public activity by Blake and Curtis. I also prepared a motion for declaratory judgment to solidify our trademark claims before their injunction could take effect. By evening, the motion and supporting documents were finalized. I met Hargrave in his office to review them. His expression was a mix of pride and fatigue. "Celestine," he said, voice solemn, "I never imagined you leading our defenses on so many fronts." I smiled wearily. I never imagined I'd be here. "But let's win this." He extended his hand, and I shook it firmly. "To Aureus, may it soar." Late that night, I found myself alone in the office, the city lights glittering like distant galaxies. I savored a quiet moment of solitude before turning back to my laptop. Because tomorrow, I'd draft the reply from Nathaniel's team, summon our IP experts, and ensure Aureus would not just soar but dominate. And so the endless game continued, a battlefield of legal minds, strategies, and wills. But I had a secret weapon. The lessons of betrayal, resilience, and unwavering purpose that had carried me from the courthouse steps to the pinnacle of corporate power. Tomorrow, I thought, I would remind Nathaniel that some flames burn too brightly to be snuffed out. Morning light slipped through the half-shades of my apartment, stirring me awake with a quiet promise. No coffee could match the rush I felt, knowing that today the battle would shift to Europe. I dressed with purpose, slipping into a charcoal gray suit that matched the steel in my heart. As I walked to Hargrave Industries, the city buzzed around me, but I moved through the crowd in my own singular orbit. At 9 a.m., I stood before the international strategy team in the Global War Room, a cavernous space where screens displayed interactive maps, legal briefs, and real-time market data. The European dossier sat on the table, thick with allegations, counterstatements, and months of regulatory correspondence. Hargrave entered, silhouette framed by morning glare. His presence commanded respect. His eyes met mine with a steely resolve. Without fanfare, I began. We face two simultaneous threats: legal challenges to our EU acquisition and brand interference via trademark suits. We must deploy coordinated defenses and strategic counteroffensives. He nodded, giving me the floor. I walked them through our European position, showing how consumer data underscored the benefits of our integrated offerings, and how local partnerships could fortify our standing. Screens flicked through charts of increased market penetration, consumer satisfaction surveys, and legal precedent. Next, I said, transitioning seamlessly, we pivot to brand defense. I've filed declaratory motions to affirm our prior rights, and our IP team stands ready to litigate if needed. A murmur of approval rippled through the room. I felt the thrill of leadership. Every clause, every chart, every strategic choice distilled into this moment. As the session ended, Hargrave placed a hand on my shoulder. "Impressive work, Celestine. We'll follow this plan." But no sooner had we adjourned than my phone pinged with an urgent message. A press leak claiming that Hargrave EU was under investigation for antitrust violations related to predatory pricing. A new allegation, sourced anonymously, designed to erode consumer confidence. I frowned. Predatory pricing required proof of below-cost sales intended to eliminate competition. I'd never seen evidence they'd done that. Our bundles were transparent. I drafted an immediate public statement. Clear data on pricing structures, reaffirmation of voluntary compliance amendments, and an offer to cooperate fully with regulators. Simultaneously, I launched a rapid response PR coordination with marketing, video statements from European executives, customer testimonials, regional news interviews. By afternoon, the narrative had shifted. Regulators responded positively to our transparency, and consumer forums buzzed with support for Hargrave EU's commitment to fair pricing. The anonymous allegation withered under the glare of facts. Exhausted but triumphant, I returned to my office. A single envelope lay on my desk, no return address. Inside, a photograph of the courthouse steps, taken years ago, showing me standing alone, wedding bouquet in hand. On the back, scrawled in familiar handwriting, "You haven't forgotten, have you?" My breath caught. The memories surged. Humiliation, betrayal, and the cold wind that had heralded my rebirth. I clenched my jaw, sliding the photo into my briefcase. They could try to rattle me, but I'd built an empire from that pain, forged from fire. Tonight I would face this specter, unbowed. Tomorrow our European victory would solidify, and the war would march onward. But tonight, alone in my apartment, I would remember how far I'd come. I woke before dawn. The city still hushed beneath a blanket of mist. The excitement of last night's pact with Hargrave had not dulled the urgency of our European front. As I dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, I felt the familiar coil of determination tighten in my chest. More battles awaited, and I intended to lead the charge. By 7:30 a.m., I was at my desk in Hargrave Industries, reviewing the updated European defense dossier. The allegations had evolved overnight. Blake and Curtis had lodged additional claims with the EU Commission, accusing Hargrave EU of abusing its dominant market position through exclusive bundling deals. They painted our integration as an anti-competitive stranglehold. Yet every data point we had told a different story. Consumers benefiting from cost savings, smaller firms maintaining viable market shares, and robust complaint channels to address any grievances. I convened the international legal team in the war room. Maps of Europe glowed across screens, color-coded to show market shifts. I led the session, outlining our strategy. 1. Consumer impact reports, *, fresh testimonials from retail customers in Germany, France, and Italy, verifying satisfaction with bundled offerings. 2. Competitive analysis, *, detailed charts showing market entry by new firms in adjacent sectors despite our presence. 3. Regulatory partnership, *, a proposal to work directly with EU antitrust officials, offering transparency and proactive compliance amendments to our commercial agreements. Hargrave sat beside me, nodding confidently as our counsel raised thoughtful questions and refined talking points. We allocated responsibilities, one group to finalize the consumer impact data, another to prepare the formal submission to the EU Commission, and a third to draft a public announcement emphasizing our collaborative stance. By midday, I met with our communications director to script a video statement from the Hargrave EU CEO, Emily Richter, highlighting our commitment to fair competition and consumer welfare. We storyboarded the video, scenes of bustling European marketplaces, small business owners praising competitive pricing, families enjoying cost-effective technology bundles. That afternoon, as the light waned beneath a gathering storm in the sky, I received a confidential brief. Blake and Curtis had secured a preliminary injunction in the UK, freezing certain software licenses pending the EU decision. This move threatened our UK subsidiary's operations immediately. I exhaled, dialing the London team. Within the hour, I orchestrated an emergency legal filing in the UK High Court, an urgent appeal to lift the injunction, backed by affidavits from licensees and contractual evidence. I prepared 2 witness statements, one from Emily Richter and one from our lead UK counsel, testifying to the bona fide nature of our licensing agreements and the irreparable harm caused by the freeze. Late evening found me on a transcontinental video conference, London's dawn against our dusk. I guided our UK lawyers through the hearing transcript, highlighting arguments to stress both legal precedent and commercial realities, how small firms relied on our software to maintain operations, and how the injunction's abrupt halt could cost thousands of jobs. Exhausted eyes drooped on every screen, yet resolve strengthened our lines. By the conference's end, we had filed the urgent appeal, scheduled a hearing for the next morning, and organized a rapid response media statement to reassure stakeholders. In the quiet aftermath, I sank into my chair, thoughts racing through the labyrinth of litigation, lobbying, and PR campaigns. My phone buzzed. Hargrave's text, meeting with EU Commission tomorrow. Lunch at 1? A small comfort in the maelstrom. I leaned back, glancing at the phoenix brooch pinned to my lapel, a silent reminder of both how I'd risen and of what could yet be forged. The world of legal warfare stretched before me like a battlefield, each front demanding both precision and audacity. Tomorrow, I thought, I would stand before regulators in Brussels, defend our vision in London's courts, and prove that resilience, born from betrayal, could reshape an empire. As midnight approached, I shut down my computer, aware that sleep might elude me. My mind replayed every argument, every data chart, every strategic nuance. And through it all, a single truth glowed. I was no longer the abandoned bride of that courthouse foyer. I was the architect of Hargrave's destiny, and I would not fail. I arrived at Hargrave Industries early Monday morning, the glass facade reflecting the sky's first light. My thoughts raced with the proposal for mediation Nathaniel had extended. It was an opening, a chance to bend the trajectory of this relentless conflict. But it could also be a trap, a facade of civility to mask his assault. I crossed the lobby, each step measured. By the time I reached the legal suite, the team was assembled, eyes alert. "Good morning," I said, setting a thick envelope on the table. "We have an opportunity to mediate with Blake and Curtis. They've proposed a preliminary session this Friday. I've drafted a framework. Key points we'll insist on, concessions we might entertain, and non-negotiables." They leaned in as I outlined the memorandum, our insistence on non-public proceedings to avoid further reputational harm, our willingness to discuss financial settlements capped at a figure far below our estimated legal costs, and our demand that any agreement include a mutual non-disparagement clause. "Keep in mind," I continued, "mediation is about leverage. We must go in strong but prepared to pivot if he tries to stall or extract bogus concessions." With the plan approved, I shifted to my next task, preparing for the internal briefing with Hargrave. As senior legal counsel, I needed to present not only our legal strategy, but also a risk analysis, pros and cons of mediation versus trial. I spent the day drafting a PowerPoint. Slide 1, Overview of mediation. Slide 2, Potential outcomes. Slide 3, Financial projections of settlement versus litigation costs. Slide 4, Reputational impact scenarios. Slide 5, Recommended board resolutions. By late afternoon, Hargrave called me into his office. His gaze was steady as I unrolled my chart. "Celestine, give it to me straight," he said. "Do we mediate?" I clicked to the risk matrix. Mediation could end this faster, save us tens of millions in legal fees, and allow us to refocus on growth. But it requires discipline. If Nathaniel picks apart our weaknesses, we could end up with a worse deal than a court judgment. He's shown he's unafraid of aggressive tactics. He nodded. "I need your recommendation." I took a breath. "I recommend we proceed, but only if we control the agenda and adhere strictly to our outline. We can use it to test his resolve and see if he's truly interested in resolution. If he's not, we walk away and go to trial with our case stronger for the data we'll gather during discussions." Hargrave considered. Then he smiled. "Let's do it. Schedule the session for Friday. And Celestine, be prepared for anything." As I left his office, adrenaline surged. Negotiation, a new frontier. I spent the next 2 days finalizing briefs, coordinating with our finance team to confirm settlement figures, and rehearsing opening statements with our lead negotiator. On Thursday evening, I received the mediation package from Blake and Curtis, a glossy brochure outlining their terms. They proposed confidentiality, a cap on any damages at $50 million, and a joint press release praising the spirit of cooperation. I forwarded the package to Hargrave with my annotations. Their figure was low, the release language favored their narrative, and they left out any clause about non-disparagement. They were testing our appetite. Friday arrived. The mediation room was a neutral space, wood-paneled walls, a long mahogany table, and flags of both companies set on either end. Nathaniel sat at the far side, secretary perched at his elbow. Our mediator, a retired judge, called the session to order. I sat beside Hargrave, drafts in hand. Opening statements began. Nathaniel spoke first. His tone measured. He lamented the conflict's toll, offered a settlement sum just under $40 million, and urged us to end the feud for the industry's greater good. When I rose, I projected calm confidence. I acknowledged the value of compromise, then outlined our counterproposal, $75 million, coupled with a mutual statement recognizing Hargrave's innovations in AI, and a binding non-disparagement clause covering both parties. The room fell silent. Nathaniel's smile flickered. He leaned toward his counsel, whispering. The mediator glanced at our figures, then asked for a private caucus. Alone with Hargrave, I felt the weight of the moment. He's higher than I thought, I said. Hargrave nodded. But still below our threshold. When the mediator returned, Nathaniel declined the counteroffer, suggesting we split the difference at $55 million, or proceed to trial. My mind spun. I considered our settlement ceiling and the projected legal expenses of a drawn-out trial. Splitting at $55 million reduced our potential risk, but signaled weakness. I stood and spoke deliberately. We'll accept $60 million, with the mutual recognition and non-disparagement. And we retain the right to reject any public statement language that favors either side unduly. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. He met Hargrave's gaze. After a pause that stretched like an eternity, he sighed and extended his hand. Agreed. A tremor of relief flickered through me. We'd secured a significant concession and shaped the narrative. As papers were signed, I felt the ground shift beneath us, not toward endless conflict, but toward a fragile peace. When I stepped out into the afternoon light, the city's pulse felt different, hopeful, charged. But as I walked away from the mediation venue, a notification blinked on my phone, a news alert from a financial blog speculating that Hargrave's stock would dip tomorrow due to the settlement announcement. The war for public perception had already begun. My breath caught. Victory tasted sweet, but the battlefield had expanded once more. I straightened my shoulders, adjusting my coat against the brisk wind. Tomorrow, I would script the press release, guide Hargrave's communications, and ensure the world knew this truce was our triumph, not his, and I would be ready. The morning sun slanted through Hargrave Industries' skyscraper windows, reflecting off polished floors and illuminating the path to the boardroom. My heart thrummed with caffeine-fueled focus. Today's mission was clear. Orchestrate the public narrative around our mediation settlement, ensuring our company, and I, emerged unscathed in the court of public opinion. I arrived early, café latte in hand, and found the communications team clustered around a bank of monitors, streaming trending social media hashtags. Hashtag Gravewinds trended, but hashtag Legal Battle Ridges flickered beneath it. Nathaniel's camp was already fueling whispers of corporate weakness, framing our $60 million settlement as an admission of guilt. I tapped my tablet, pulling up our draft press release and accompanying Quand A dossier. Within minutes, I convened the team. Here's our approach, I began, voice steady. We emphasize initiative. Hargrave initiated the mediation to protect stakeholders, minimize disruption, and demonstrate industry leadership. We'll roll out 3 coordinated elements: an official news release, CEO video address, and targeted op-ed placement. Heads nodded as I outlined the release. Open with a concise recap of the conflict, swiftly pivot to highlight our proactive resolution, and close with vision-forward language about reinvesting legal savings into R&D and community partnerships. Next, the video address. Hargrave at center frame, delivering a succinct message underscoring corporate responsibility, respect for the industry, and gratitude to employees and customers. I provided annotated scripts and stage direction to convey sincerity and strength. Finally, an op-ed for the Financial Times penned by me, titled "The Power of Constructive Resolution: A Case for Corporate Diplomacy," exploring why mediation is a mark of strategic maturity and leadership. By late morning, the drafts were polished, visuals approved, and scheduling confirmed. I pressed send on the embargoed press release, knowing at 2 p.m. our narrative would cascade across newswires. In the interim, I slipped into Hargrave's office for a quick debrief. He offered me a nod of respect. "Your communications strategy will shape the market's reaction," he said. "Thank you for leading this." I smiled faintly. "It's critical we control the story." At precisely 2 p.m., our release went live. I watched as analytics spiked. Positive mentions surged. And our video got traction on LinkedIn and Twitter. Even some industry analysts praised our transparency. #HargraveForward climbed the ranks. But under the surface, Nathaniel's supporters latched onto nuances, questioning the settlement cap as too high, the non-disparagement clause as silencing accountability. I monitored these ripples and prepared rapid response talking points for tomorrow's investor call. As the day waned, I headed home mentally exhausted yet exhilarated. Walking through the city streets, I reflected on my journey, from that humiliating courthouse foyer to commanding corporate narratives. Each challenge had demanded adaptation, legal expertise, negotiation finesse, and now media mastery. I paused under a street lamp, pulling my coat tighter against the crisp air. In the glow, I felt the weight of both victory and vigilance. This settlement would hold, for now, but tomorrow, new battles would arise in shareholder meetings, regulatory reviews, and perhaps, personal reckonings. I allowed a small, triumphant smile. I had turned my greatest betrayal into the engine of my ascent. And though the war for power was far from over, I had proven one immutable truth. Celestine Marlowe never backed down. Tomorrow, I thought, I'd greet the world anew. But tonight, I would savor this moment before the next chapter began. The first light of dawn edged across my desk as I opened the email detailing the spike in social chatter. Hargrave's share price had dipped by 4% in pre-market trading, investors jittery over the settlement headline. It was an expected reaction, but one that required swift countermeasures to stabilize confidence. I sipped my coffee and drafted the morning memo, talking points for CEO remarks on the trading floor, a targeted email to key institutional investors, and a short investor presentation highlighting our post-settlement strategy, reinvestment into R&D, expansion plans, and streamlined operations funded by litigation savings. At 8 a.m. sharp, Hargrave and I convened in the trading floor briefing room, its walls lined with live tickers and market screens. He addressed the assembled analysts and senior investors, delivering a concise, confident reassessment of our capital allocation. Behind him, our slides projected forecasted growth, robust pipeline metrics, and a reaffirmation of our long-term vision. As questions came fast, ranging from regulatory risk to R&D spending, Hargrave leaned on the materials I'd prepared, weaving in examples of successful product launches and testimonials from strategic partners. Within 30 minutes, the mood shifted. Skepticism gave way to measured optimism. By mid-morning, market sentiment began to improve. Our share price stabilized and inched upward. The communications team cheered the early win, but I remained vigilant. The narrative war was ongoing. Returning to my office, I reviewed the litigation calendar. The next major milestone loomed: the antitrust trial in Brussels set for 4 weeks from now. Preparation had to be thorough. Witness prep, expert reports finalized, cross-examination outlines drafted. I called an off-site meeting with our EU legal and economic experts to refine our opening strategy. Over coffee in a nearby conference suite, we rehearsed our oral argument framework, beginning with consumer welfare principles, moving through empirical market analyses, and concluding with our commitment to collaborative compliance. That afternoon, my assistant delivered a printed letter, handwritten, in a crisp envelope, another note from Nathaniel. His handwriting curled across the page. "You're as relentless as I feared. But remember, some wounds never truly heal. No signature, no return address." My chest tightened. The taunt was personal, echoing old scars. I filed it away with the other correspondence. No reaction, no emotion. Instead, I turned to the urgent task at hand, finalizing witness statements. I spent hours refining the language for Dr. Ingrid Muller, our leading economist, emphasizing clarity for a non-technical audience and sound legal grounding. Each revision sharpened our narrative, ensuring our experts spoke with both authority and accessibility. By early evening, I sent the final drafts to Brussels, instructing local counsel to schedule pre-trial depositions and coordinate translation for regional counsel. As I locked down my computer, I allowed myself a moment of stillness. The war had shifted from public warfare to a meticulously orchestrated siege, gathering evidence, preparing witnesses, and fortifying each legal argument. Tomorrow I would outline the trial day zero logistics, courtroom technology checks, witness arrival schedules, and moot sessions to practice cross-examinations. The journey from that courthouse foyer, abandoned bride to corporate juggernaut, had led me here. And I would face the jury with the same unwavering resolve that had carried me through every battle, calm, collected, and ready to prove that my greatest betrayal had become my greatest strength. The early morning light in New York City filtered through the blinds of my apartment, casting long shadows onto the cityscape below. I rose before dawn, the adrenaline of yesterday's investor call still pulsing through my veins. Today was different. No media strategizing, no regulatory hearings. Instead, I had a direct flight to Brussels for the antitrust trial, an event that would define not just Hargrave EU's future, but cement my reputation as a formidable legal strategist. I dressed meticulously in a tailored black suit, the phoenix brooch pinned over my heart as a talisman of perseverance. In the car to the airport, I reviewed the final binder of trial materials: 12 expert affidavits, 7 depositions, reams of consumer impact data, and the chronologies of every contested contract clause. Each page represented hours of toil, by me and my teams in London, Frankfurt, and Milan. At JFK, I boarded the 8:15 a.m. direct flight to Brussels. Gazing out at the clouds, I rehearsed my opening statement, a narrative weaving the human impact of Hargrave's EU policies with the legal precision required by the court. By the time the plane descended over Brussels, my focus was razor-sharp. Customs and immigration were swift. A black sedan awaited me curbside, its driver neatly pressed in a uniform bearing Hargrave Industries' crest. As we sped through the European capital, the city of law felt familiar, yet the stakes were higher. On the ride, my phone chimed with a text from Emily Richter. "Good luck today. We're all behind you." I smiled, typing a quick, "Thank you, let's win this," under my breath. The Palais de Justice loomed ahead, its towering columns reminiscent of the London Great Hall, but larger, more imposing. Inside, marble floors echoed with every footstep, and uniformed ushers guided me to Courtroom 4, the venue for our landmark trial. My legal team, composed of Brussels counsel, economic experts, and a cadre of litigious associates, gathered at the back. I signaled readiness, and we took our seats at the plaintiff's table. The courtroom filled quickly. Opposing counsel from Blake and Curtis arrayed in dark suits, media squeezed into benches, and EU regulators observing from the gallery. Judge Verbruggen, renowned for her stringent courtroom decorum, presided. At 10 a.m., the bailiff called the court to order. Opposing counsel stood to present their argument. They asserted that Hargrave EU's bundling practices artificially inflated market share, forcing smaller firms to accept disadvantageous terms. They called witnesses, a competitor's former sales director and an independent retailer, both painting a picture of coercion. Then, my moment came. I rose, voice steady and clear. I began with a concise overview. Hargrave EU's mission to deliver integrated solutions at scale, increasing accessibility for consumers and reducing costs for businesses. I walked the court through the consumer impact reports, video depositions of satisfied SME owners, charts detailing market entry rates, and expert testimony confirming the innocuous nature of our bundling. The judge nodded as I transitioned to the legal framework, citing EU competition law's emphasis on consumer welfare above formality. Each citation was crisp, each precedent relevant. I paused to let a hush settle over the courtroom, anticipation hanging like a cloud. I concluded by proposing a remedy approach. Should any oversight be found, Hargrave was prepared to implement targeted adjustments rather than dismantle its entire model. My final words echoed: we seek not merely to defend practices, but to demonstrate that our model elevates competition and consumer choice across the EU. A brief recess followed. In the corridor, colleagues offered encouraging smiles. I allowed myself a moment of gratitude. To the countless analysts, counsel, and executives who had trusted my direction. Inside, the judge delivered a tentative post-trial schedule, closing arguments in 2 days, with a final ruling expected within the month. The calendar was tight, but achievable. As I exited the courtroom, sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, illuminating motes of dust like floating evidence. I felt the weight of history beneath my heels. This trial would shape EU competition law and corporate conduct for years. But for now, I had tasks to complete. Prepare rebuttal notes, finalize cross-examination questions, and coordinate with local press to manage the narrative. The war continued. Later that evening, in my hotel suite overlooking the Grand Place, I opened my notebook and wrote: 1. Refine cross-examination strategy for defendant's economist. 2. Consolidate consumer witness prep for tomorrow's sessions. 3. Draft closing argument outline emphasizing consumer-centric jurisprudence. 4. Engage with Brussels press. Controlled quotes and fact sheets. 5. Rest. Tomorrow's battles require a sharper mind. The dawn in Brussels was crisp and golden as I stepped out of the taxi onto the stone courtyard of the Palais de Justice. The weight of yesterday's testimony lingered in the sharp air. Each account, each data point had edged us closer to vindication. Yet today promised the fiercest challenge: cross-examinations and witness impeachments that would test both our evidence and our resolve. I paused at the grand entrance, slipping the phoenix brooch into my lapel, a silent ritual that grounded me. Inside, the corridors were hushed, save for distant murmurs of legal teams preparing their strategies. I nodded to Eleanor Trent, my barrister, who stood by the courtroom door reviewing her notes. "Ready?" I asked. She offered a determined smile. "Let's finish this." Courtroom 4 filled quickly. Company counsel, regulatory observers, and media packed the benches. At the plaintiff's table, our experts, economic analysts, consumer advocates, and technical leads, sat primed for scrutiny. The first cross-examination fell to Nathaniel's lead counsel, a sharp-tongued litigator named Hargrove, renowned for disarming witnesses with rapid-fire questions. He approached Dr. Ingrid Muller, our chief economist, aiming to undermine her consumer impact report by probing data collection methods and sample bias. As Hargrove trained his gaze on Dr. Muller, I felt a tightening in my chest. But she stood firm, responding with clarity and composure. I watched her hands steady, her voice unwavering as she defended the integrity of surveys conducted across multiple EU markets. When Hargrove paused, having drawn no substantive concessions, I felt a surge of pride. Eleanor gave me a brief nod, a silent acknowledgement of victory. Throughout the morning, the pattern repeated. Aggressive probing met with meticulous preparation. I had anticipated every angle: control group particulars, pricing variance nuances, regulatory thresholds, and equipped our witnesses accordingly. At midday, I rose for my turn. The court hushed as I approached the stand. Opposing counsel attempted to corner me on the voluntariness of our compliance amendments, suggesting they were post facto gestures rather than genuine safeguards. I met his insinuations with calm. Drawing on my notes, I recounted the timeline. When we first identified potential regulatory concerns, the board had immediately authorized the formation of a compliance task force, over which I presided. I described drafting the amendments, coordinating with legal and policy teams, and submitting them to the EU Commission within 48 hours, a timeline corroborated by dated emails and executive signatures. The Council frowned, unable to dislodge my account bolstered by documentary evidence. The judge glanced at the exhibits, then back to me with a faint nod of approval. I returned to my seat, head held high. Afternoon sessions focused on our technical leads, cross-examined on the specifics of software bundling. I watched as they navigated intricate questions about licensing structures, parent-child agreements, and modular product architectures, each answer revealing both their expertise and the cooperative framework we designed. By late afternoon, the cross-examinations concluded. Eleanor and I shared a brief moment of quiet triumph before the court adjourned for the day. In the hallway, journalists jostled for comments. I offered measured quotes, emphasizing Hargrave's dedication to consumer-focused innovation and our respectful engagement with EU regulators. My words were concise, yet conveyed the confidence of someone who believed in her case. Back in our Brussels office, I convened a debrief with Eleanor and our experts. We reviewed the day's transcripts, highlighting moments of strength and noting areas for reinforcement before closing arguments. Eleanor looked at me, exhaustion mingling with exhilaration. We've laid the groundwork. Now we craft the narrative for the judge. It must tie every thread, legal principle, economic impact, and human stories, into an unassailable tapestry. I nodded, already thinking ahead to tomorrow's task, drafting the closing statement. My mind swirled with passages to echo Dr. Muller's testimony, to invoke the Manchester layoffs we had averted, and to remind the court of our proactive commitment to fair competition. That evening, I returned to my hotel overlooking the Grand Place. The city lights danced against the medieval facades, a reminder that history watched us. I opened my laptop and began outlining opening invocation, consumer welfare as EU's cornerstone. 2. Recap of cross-examination victories. 3. Synthesis of documentary and testimonial evidence. IV. Proposed equitable remedy focusing on targeted compliance enhancements. Versus call for affirmation of innovation-driven market models. Hours passed as I refined each bullet, sculpting language that would resonate in the judge's mind. The furthest rumble of distant laughter from a nearby cafe drifted through my window, evoking calm. At last, I saved my draft and closed the computer. Tomorrow would demand every ounce of rhetorical skill and strategic acumen I possessed. But as I gazed down at the glowing city, I allowed myself a single acknowledgement. I had carried the flames of my past to forge a future no betrayal could ever extinguish. And I would be ready to claim the victory that awaited. The dawn after our marathon Brussels sessions felt surreal. The city, still hushed beneath a gentle mist, seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for the next move in our years-long conflict. I rose early, the echoes of closing arguments still humming in my mind. Today wasn't about courtrooms or boardrooms. It was about preparation for integration, a task both strategic and deeply personal, as I steered two cultures toward unity under Hargrave's banner. I dressed in a tailored navy suit, structured, confident, yet approachable. I pinned the phoenix brooch to my lapel, feeling its weight as a reminder of transformation. Over coffee, I reviewed the integration plan, a 6-month roadmap blending Hargrave EU's agile, consumer-centric ethos with the parent company's expansive R&D capabilities. Legal considerations peppered the document: compliance checkpoints, governance alignment, intellectual property harmonization. By 8:30 a.m., I was at Hargrave's London office, where the integration summit began. The boardroom was a microcosm of corporate diplomacy. EU executives in crisp attire, New York-based VPs dialing in over video link, and HR, IT, and finance leads gathered around a polished oak table. I took a deep breath and addressed the room. Good morning. Today, we embark on a journey to shape Hargrave's next chapter. One where our combined strengths propel us to new heights. Our goal: seamless integration that honors local autonomy while leveraging our global scale. I walked them through the roadmap. Phase 1. Cultural immersion workshops and compliance training. Phase 2. Process alignment, shared technology platforms, and joint product development teams. Phase 3. Brand unification strategies and consolidated reporting frameworks. Each phase contained detailed milestones, accountability matrices, and risk mitigation plans. As I presented, questions arose. EU leaders worried about over-centralization. US executives flagged potential delays from regional regulatory complexities. I navigated each concern with the data we'd compiled. Surveys showing employee willingness to engage in cross-border collaboration, case studies of successful past integrations, and legal assurances from our global counsel. By lunchtime, consensus formed around a pilot initiative, a cross-functional task force co-led by Emily Richter in Frankfurt and Thomas Leone in New York. This team would oversee Phase 1 and report progress bi-weekly. After the summit, I joined Emily and Thomas for a working lunch at a nearby bistro. The three of us sketched out team charters, communication cadences, and feedback loops. We agreed on transparent trackers and monthly leadership town halls streamed across offices to maintain momentum and address issues in real time. Returning to my desk that afternoon, I received a secure message. Nathaniel's firm had quietly filed a motion for contempt of court in the UK, alleging we violated the settlement terms by publicly discussing aspects of the agreement in our press release. The war had shifted again, this time to the fine print. I exhaled, scanning the motion. They pointed to our LinkedIn Q&A post where we had highlighted the mutual non-disparagement clause, interpreting it as commentary on their motives. It was a flimsy claim, but if left unaddressed, it could trigger negative publicity and potentially a penalty. I immediately drafted a formal response, affirming our adherence to the confidentiality provisions, clarifying that our public statements were fully compliant, and requesting dismissal of the contempt motion. I supported our position with exhibit references, time-stamped drafts, legal counsel notes, and the mediator's confirmation that post-mediation commentary was permissible where it did not disparage. With the response sent to the UK High Court Registry, I pivoted back to integration. My assistant flagged an urgent call from Hargrave. He congratulated me on the seamless summit, then shifted tone. Celestine, the board wants a status update on your integration plan at next week's quarterly meeting. They're expecting measurable metrics, key performance indicators, adoption rates, early wins. Can you deliver? I met his gaze. Steady. I'll prepare a report. Baseline metrics from both regions, target adoption rates, early pilot outcomes, and an executive summary of integration risks and mitigation strategies. He nodded, relief flickering. Good. And Celestine, I trust you'll handle the UK matter as well. I've already filed our response, I assured him. We'll address any follow-ups immediately. The call ended, leaving me both empowered and stretched thin. I had to deliver on two fronts: prove the integration's early success and defend our settlement from procedural assault. I spent the rest of the afternoon collating metrics, employee survey results from cultural workshops in Frankfurt, platform adoption logs from pilot teams in London and New York, and compliance training completion rates. I distilled the data into a dashboard. Bar charts showing 87% positive engagement, heat maps revealing collaboration hotspots, and Gantt projections for the remaining phases. As evening fell, I drafted the integration status report's narrative sections, an introduction framing the merged vision, a methodology overview, key achievements, and a roadmap ahead. Then I inserted visual aids, a world map highlighting pilot sites, a timeline of completed milestones, and a risk heat map indicating potential bottlenecks. With the first draft complete, I turned to the UK contempt response. I refined the language, ensuring precision. Pursuant to Section 7.4 of the settlement agreement, public discourse regarding the agreement's procedural aspects is expressly permitted where it does not constitute disparagement. Our LinkedIn post falls squarely within these parameters, as it affirms mutual commitments rather than impugns Mr. Blake's motives. I attached supporting exhibits and e-filed the document. Finally, I leaned back, surveying the day's twin accomplishments. The integration plan was gaining traction. Our legal defenses remained robust. My phone buzzed with a single message from Hargrave. Impressive. You are invaluable. I allowed myself a brief smile. Betrayal had carved scars into my past, but it had also sharpened my resolve and skills. Today, I wielded them to build bridges and shield victories. Tomorrow, I would refine the quarterly presentation, prepare for the contempt hearing, and ensure that every thread of this intricate tapestry of victories remained unbroken. And no matter the challenges ahead, I would face them with unwavering purpose, proof that the phoenix not only rises but soars. The morning sunlight filtered through the blinds of my office, casting a warm glow across the integration dashboards and legal briefs piled on my desk. Today would test both sides of my dual role, defending our settlement in the UK contempt hearing and presenting the integration progress to the Hargrave board at our quarterly meeting. I sipped a cup of strong coffee, feeling the familiar surge of adrenaline. First, the contempt hearing. By mid-morning, I was seated in a glass-walled conference room at the London office, surrounded by our UK counsel. The judge's chambers were just down the hall. Her reputation for strict adherence to procedural rules preceded her. I reviewed our filed response, a succinct defense demonstrating that our LinkedIn statement fell within the settlement's permissible commentary bounds. I had annotated every reference, dated drafts, mediators' clarifications, and counsel's notes affirming our right to public discussion of non-disparagement clauses. Shortly, we proceeded to courtroom 12. The gavel struck, and the judge called the matter. Blake and Curtis's counsel stood first, reasserting that we had breached confidentiality by implying bad faith in our press release. I listened attentively as they argued, taking mental notes on tone and emphasis. When it was my turn, I stood, projecting calm authority. I systematically dismantled their assertions, highlighting the precise language of the settlement, showing how our post-mediation communications adhered strictly to the agreed-upon boundaries, and reminding the court that judicial guidance had permitted discussion of the mediation's factual outcomes. I referenced the mediator's written confirmation and our counsel's contemporaneous notes. The judge leaned forward, flipping through the exhibits. After a moment, she addressed the court. "I find no contempt. The respondent's public statements fall within the allowable scope. This motion is dismissed." A collective sigh of relief rippled through our side. I offered a brief nod to our counsel before the session concluded. Outside the courtroom, reporters sought comment. I provided a measured statement. Hargrave has fully complied with every aspect of our settlement. We welcome clarity in corporate discourse and remain committed to transparency. With the UK front secured, I returned to the London office to prepare for the board meeting. The integration metrics awaited: adoption rates, employee engagement scores, compliance training completion, and early performance indicators from joint RAND-D initiatives. By 1 p.m., I stood before the Hargrave board in New York, streaming live via video link. The boardroom was hushed as I began my presentation. Slide 1 displayed the key metrics: 92% completion of Phase 1 workshops, 85% adherence to compliance protocols, and successful launch of a pilot AI feature from the Aureus line in 2 European markets. I walked the board through each milestone, highlighting collaborative wins, cross-border workshops that fostered team cohesion, legal frameworks that safeguarded intellectual property, and early market responses that validated our strategic direction. When questions arose, concerns about time zone coordination and resource allocation, I answered with data-backed solutions, rotating leadership panels, centralized communication platforms, and agile sprints to align deliverables. Midway, the CFO interjected, requesting clarity on cost synergies. I pivoted to slide 8, detailed cost analyses showing a 12% reduction in redundant legal and compliance overhead, projected annual savings of $18 million, and reallocated budgets for joint innovation funds. The board members nodded, impressed. I concluded with a vision statement. Our integrated enterprise is poised to lead the next wave of ethical, consumer-first innovation, combining Hargrave's global scale with the nimble ingenuity of our European teams. As I wrapped up, applause rippled through the virtual room. The chairman, Mr. Hawthorne, offered his thanks. "Your leadership has been exemplary, Celestine." With the board's approval of our continued integration roadmap, I exhaled, feeling both relief and resolve. 2 major battles won today: the contempt hearing in London and the board's unanimous endorsement. That evening, as I returned to my apartment, I reflected on the journey from the courthouse foyer to this moment of triumph. The scars of betrayal had hardened into a determination that propelled me through legal mazes and corporate strategy sessions alike. Tomorrow, new challenges would emerge. Perhaps a fresh filing from Nathaniel, perhaps a regulatory audit, perhaps an unforeseen market shift. But tonight, I allowed myself a moment of quiet pride, knowing that no matter what lay ahead, I had the strength, skill, and will to face it. The next morning, London's drizzle gave way to a rare, sunlit sky, as if the city understood the importance of the day ahead. I arrived at Hargrave Industries early, the weight of our recent triumphs, tempered by the looming antitrust trial and the need to shepherd our integration forward. Today, however, was dedicated to crisis management. The UK contempt motion had been dismissed, but the press was hungry for every scrap of controversy. We needed to shore up our public relations defenses before speculation could take root. In the sunlight-dappled atrium, I found our communications director, Sylvia Klein, reviewing coverage on her tablet. Headlines ranged from celebratory to cautious. I tapped her shoulder, and she looked up, relief flickering in her eyes. "Good morning," I said, leaning against the marble ledge. "We need a two-pronged approach, reinforce our transparency narrative, and engage directly with key stakeholders, investors, partners, and regulators." Sylvia nodded. "I've drafted an op-ed from the CEO and lined up interviews with Financial Times and the Wall Street Journal. But I think a direct letter to investors will personalize the message." I smiled. "Exactly. Draft a letter emphasizing the settlement's strategic benefits, resolving conflict, reallocating resources to innovation, and strengthening our European operations. I'll review and finalize." With that settled, I moved upstairs to my office and dialed the head of investor relations. Within the hour, we had crafted a concise, heartfelt letter from Hargrave, explaining that our decision to settle was driven by a duty to shareholders and a vision for sustainable growth. Sylvia coordinated its distribution to major funds and analysts, while social media teams prepared shareable summaries with infographics. Satisfied with our communications firewall, I turned to the other half of my morning, preparing for a high-stakes meeting with EU regulators. Our voluntary compliance amendments had placated the Commission, but with the trial in full swing, maintaining regulatory goodwill was paramount. By 11, I boarded the Eurostar back to Brussels, trading the bustle of London for the stoic architecture of European governance. On the train, I reviewed my briefing book, progress updates on compliance benchmarks, new pilot program results from our digital access initiative in rural Spain, and a summary of our local community investment plans to support small tech startups, a gesture demonstrating Hargrave's commitment to nurturing the broader ecosystem. Arriving at the Commission's building, I was escorted past security into a modern conference suite. Inside, commissioners and legal advisors awaited, their expressions polite but attentive. I presented our latest data: over 95% completion of mandated compliance training across EU subsidiaries, a 20% increase in third-party vendor audits, and the launch of an EU-wide advisory council comprised of independent experts to guide ongoing practices. As I spoke, I sensed their approval. One commissioner, a stern but fair-minded woman named Valérie Dubois, asked pointed questions on audit methodologies. I fielded each with thorough documentation and assurance that our systems adhered to both EU directives and local regulations. When I finished, she offered a brief nod, an unspoken seal of confidence. Later, as I walked through Brussels' historic streets toward the train station, I reflected on the delicate balance of corporate power and regulatory oversight. Each victory, from courtroom wins to boardroom strategies, had been hard-won, a testament to meticulous preparation and unyielding resolve. Back in London late that evening, I returned to my desk to find an email flagged urgent from Hargrave's Chief Technology Officer. Our Aureus AI platform had hit a critical bug in its beta release, causing service disruptions for early adopters. This was the first operational hiccup since integration began, a reminder that the battles extended beyond legal and PR arenas. I drafted an immediate response, coordinate a rapid incident team, issue transparent status updates to affected clients, and propose a temporary rollback with a clear timeline for a patched relaunch. By midnight, I had scheduled a 6 a.m. emergency call with IT, customer success, and communications to execute the plan. I leaned back, staring at the city lights through my office window. The world of Celestine Marlowe, The woman who had once been abandoned at a courthouse had evolved into a realm where legal acumen, strategic vision, and operational agility converged. The challenges remained unending: regulatory scrutiny, market volatility, technological pitfalls, and the ever-present shadow of Nathaniel's next move. The sun had barely crept over the skyline when I arrived at the Hargrave Industries garage, where my car awaited for the drive to the Bristol data center. Months of integration had given me confidence in our systems, but the Aureus bug from last week had reminded me that technology's brilliance could be as fragile as glass. Today's mission: oversee the rollout of the patched update and ensure the platform's stability before user traffic peaked at noon. I slipped into the driver's seat, adjusting my blazer as I reviewed the incident report on my tablet, root cause analysis, error logs, and the engineering team's remediation plan. The patch had undergone 2 rounds of testing, but I knew from experience that real-world environments could still surprise us. The motorway stretched ahead, early commuters dotting the asphalt like migrating birds. I navigated the car onto the M4, the pages of my binder flipping open to the next agenda: a midday virtual meeting with the global operations heads, followed by an afternoon session with Blake and Curtis's executive liaison. Ironically, now a collaborator to finalize settlement details for our jointly managed client distributions. At the data center entrance, security scanned my badge with a nod. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed above rows of server racks. My IT director, Marcus Chen, met me at the entrance. "Good to see you, Ms. Marlowe," he said, leading me down the aisle. "The patch deployment starts in 10 minutes. I watched as engineers typed commands, firewalls reconfigured, and backups verified. The room was electric with focused energy. When Marcus gave the signal, they initiated the rollout. For the next 30 minutes, I observed real-time metrics: CPU loads, memory usage, network latency. A bead of sweat formed at my temple as a warning icon blinked. An unexpected spike in latency on one cluster. I knelt beside an engineer, tracing the server logs on a monitor. It was a minor routing misconfiguration. A quick command to reroute traffic solved the bottleneck. Relief washed over me. At noon, the platform showed a clean green status. I tapped the glass of the nearest rack, grateful for my team's swift response. My phone buzzed. The global ops meeting was starting. In a conference room, I joined the video call. Executives from Asia Pacific, Latin America, and North America popped into view, each reporting system health and user engagement metrics. When it was my turn, I summarized the morning's rollout. Patch successful, minor latency issue resolved, full redundancy restored. They nodded, voices of thanks echoed. I then pivoted to integration KPIs, highlighting cross-region collaboration on Aureus features and unified support protocols. After the call, I dashed back to my office to prepare for the final settlement session with Blake and Curtis. I reviewed our mutual distribution plan, co-branded marketing guidelines, revenue-sharing models, and the non-disparagement clause we'd meticulously crafted in mediation. At 3 p.m., I assembled with our settlement team. The room was calm, but tension lingered in the air. 2 rivals turned partners, finalizing the contours of their alliance. Their liaison, Victoria Reyes, entered with a courteous nod. We walked through the final draft, each clause, each schedule, each confidentiality provision. When she asked about a timeline extension for their marketing rollout, I negotiated an extra week, on the condition we receive joint approval of all materials. Victoria hesitated, then agreed. With pens uncapped, we signed the final agreement. I felt the ink dry like a seal on months of conflict, compromise, and collaboration. As we shook hands, I allowed a small smile. The truce had matured into partnership. Yet I knew this peace, like any alliance, would require vigilance. Later that evening, I entered my apartment to find a single white envelope on the coffee table. No return address. Hands steady, I opened it. Celestine, congratulations on the Aureus success. But beware, the deepest wounds run invisible. Meet me tomorrow at 10 a.m. N. My heart skipped. Nathaniel's signature move, an invitation cloaked as a warning. I lowered the envelope and closed my eyes. The patch had held. The settlement was final. Our partnership stable. But Nathaniel's presence remained, a ghost at every victory, reminding me that true peace required confronting the past. I set the envelope aside and began drafting my reply, a carefully worded message agreeing to meet, on my terms. Tonight I would plan. Tomorrow I would face him again. Because some battles never end, but neither does the determination to win. Before dawn broke over London, I was already at my desk, assembling a dossier for the European trial's closing arguments. The past 18 parts of this saga, marriage, betrayal, reinvention, boardroom battles, and courtroom victories, culminated here. Tomorrow, Justice Verbruggen would hear our final plea. But tonight was for reflection and relentless preparation. My office windows offered a view of the Thames, its waters reflecting a silvery mist. I laid out every document: Dr. Ingrid Muller's economic analysis, consumer testimony transcripts, compliance amendment timelines, and cross-examination highlights. Beside each exhibit, I placed margin notes, reminding me of the human stories behind the data: the Manchester startup that would have folded without Hargrave EU's support, the family in Warsaw, whose children's education depended on reliable internet access facilitated by our bundles. At midnight, I rehearsed my closing statement aloud. Your Honor, distinguished counsel, if this court grants Hargrave EU's practices the respect they deserve, not merely as corporate maneuvers, but as engines of consumer empowerment, then Europe's economy will flourish, its innovation thrive, and its citizens prosper. We ask not just for legal vindication, but for the affirmation of a vision that places human impact at the heart of competition law. I paused, letting the words echo in the empty room. They carried the weight of every trial, every negotiation, every late-night strategy session. At 6 a.m., I convened with Eleanor Trent and our Brussels counsel to finalize exhibits. We reviewed witness availability for rebuttal, ensuring our experts were rested and ready. We mapped courtroom logistics: entries, seating, exhibit numbering and timings down to the minute. By 9 a.m., a black sedan delivered me to the Palais de Justice. The rain-soaked streets glistened, mirroring the tension beneath the courtroom's grandeur. Inside, Justice Verbruggen's clerk greeted me with a nod and directed me to the chamber. The gallery was packed: regulators, reporters, EU stakeholders, and Hargrave EU employees who flew in for the landmark decision. Nathaniel's team watched from the other side, their collective confidence tempered by the string of defeats we'd handed them. The judge entered, and the final session began. Opposing counsel spoke first, summarizing their arguments with practiced precision: market dominance, alleged barriers to entry, and the principle that bundling, regardless of intent, risked suppressing competitors. Then, my moment arrived. I rose, feeling the still hush of the courtroom, and whispered to myself, for every life we've touched, for every enterprise we've empowered. I delivered my closing argument, sweeping through the legal precedents, the economic analyses, and the human narratives. I spoke of Manchester's coders, Warsaw's families, and Parisian entrepreneurs, weaving data and testimony into a tapestry of impact. I quoted Justice Palmer's words from the UK hearing: "Justice weighs the human cost," reminding the court that our practice aligned with that principle. I concluded, Hargrave EU's model does not extinguish competition, it ignites it. Our bundles serve as incubators for innovation, not barriers to entry. We seek your affirmation that competition law should elevate consumer welfare above form, and that our practices stand as proof of Europe's commitment to economic progress and social prosperity. Silence followed as I sat. The weight of 18 parts of every victory and setback hung in the balance. The judge reviewed the exhibits one final time before speaking. Hargrave EU has demonstrated that its practices serve to empower consumers and foster innovation. The injunctions filed are hereby dismissed and no penalties shall be imposed. This court commends Hargrave EU's proactive compliance measures and its commitment to transparent governance. Relief, pride, and a surge of triumph flooded me. Colleagues exchanged embraces. Tears glistened in the eyes of our Brussels team. Nathaniel's counsel stared impassively. Yet I sensed their realization: the long duel had ended in our favor. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed as I stepped into the rain, umbrella held overhead. A reporter shouted, "Ms. Marlowe, how does it feel?" I offered a steady smile. "Today is a victory for every consumer, every entrepreneur, and every legal principle that values human impact. Hargrave EU will continue to innovate with integrity." Back at Hargrave Industries, a celebration awaited in the boardroom: champagne, applause, and words of gratitude from every quarter. Hargrave himself raised a toast. "To Celestine Marlowe, your journey from that courthouse foyer to this chamber proves that resilience, integrity, and vision can reshape the world." I held my glass high, echoing his sentiment. Betrayal had sparked my transformation. Purpose had guided my path, and today's verdict affirmed my place, not only as a survivor, but as a leader. Tomorrow, the final chapter beckoned. A new frontier of opportunities, challenges, and the promise that our story was far from over. And I would be ready, always ready, for whatever came next. The morning light in New York filtered through my curtains as if heralding a new dawn for Hargrave Industries, and for me. The war that began on those courthouse steps had led through a labyrinth of betrayal, legal duels, corporate strategy, and personal reinvention. Now, at the 20-part finale, it was time to close this chapter and open the door to the future. I arrived at the executive suite before dawn, the city skyline ablaze with promise. Today's agenda: the final integration review, the strategic innovation roadmap, and a personal decision I had postponed since the courthouse fiasco, facing Nathaniel one last time on my terms. The boardroom welcomed me with hushed anticipation. Hargrave sat at the head of the table, flanked by senior executives and European leaders. I presented the integration report in detail. Phase 4 completion at 100%, global revenue synergy surpassing projections by 15%, and joint R&D projects on AI ethics and sustainable technology moving from concept to pilot. As applause followed my conclusion, Hargrave rose, raising a toast to the assembled leaders. "To Celestine Marlowe, architect of our rebirth and guardian of our future." I felt a surge of gratitude and pride, yet the final test remained: the personal reckoning with Nathaniel. The security detail had arranged a discreet meeting room in our building's private wing. When I entered, Nathaniel stood, silhouette framed by morning glare. His posture was unguarded. No secretary, no entourage. "Celestine," he said simply. I sat opposite him, letting the years of conflict and triumph settle between us. "I wanted to see you here, on common ground," he began. "Not as adversaries, but as two people shaped by a shared past." I nodded, voice steady. "Our past forged me. I chose to rise. Today, I stand unbroken." He held my gaze. "I know I caused you pain. I never apologized in a way that mattered." My breath caught. The moment I delayed for 20 parts had arrived. I leaned forward. "You left me at the altar, but that moment also freed me. I learned I didn't need you to define my worth." He exhaled. "I was afraid of your brilliance, and of facing my own failings. Seeing you turn adversity into strength, it humbled me." Silence. Then I spoke the words that had taken years to form. "I forgive you, not for your sake but mine. I've transcended that broken bride. Now I choose my own path, unburdened by old wounds." A single tear glistened in his eye. He nodded, deep respect in his gaze. Outside the room, the world awaited. New ventures, new strategies, new stories. I rose, extending my hand. Nathaniel clasped it firmly. As I departed the building, the city hummed with possibility. My phone buzzed. Hargrave's message: "Celebratory dinner tonight at the top of the world." I smiled. From abandoned bride to boardroom leader, every trial had led me here. The phoenix within me would continue to rise. Bolder, wiser, undaunted. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.